In this Roll for Crit preview, we're going to enter the Library of Jakkarth. This ancient structure only appears once every few hundred years, where within its walls holds ancient secrets, spells, and, most importantly, keys to the Shrine of Jakkarth, where the greatest secrets of all the world are kept. There's one catch though. Only one person may enter that shrine, with the rest being locked in the library for all eternity. So join me as we enter the library and hopefully we make it out as the sole survivors. The game begins with each player choosing a mage of a different color and setting them up in the entranceway. Your goal is to explore this library, flipping over new rooms, which may spawn some tiles, and hopefully finding enough keys to make it back to the entranceway and win the game. To do so, you need to find 5 keys of a matching color and make it back to the start. Keep in mind they come in 3 different colors and they don't need to match your player color. On your turn, you'll take up to 3 actions, with some actions being limited to once per turn, others can be taken more than once. The first limited action is actually very simple. It's revealing 5 keys at the entrance spot and winning. Keep in mind, the entrance spot is going to be usually one large spot. Depending on player count, there are different tiles for the start. And if you can make it there, spend an action to show off the 5 keys of the same color, then you've won. Obviously, it makes sense that this is limited as it should only happen once per game. The other ones, however, will happen more often, and you'll probably wish that you could do it more than once per turn. First one's quite simple. It's moving. Roll 2d6s and add up the total. That's the number of squares you can move. Now, I already put down a tile when I was talking about exploring, but let's say we moved 2. Whenever you reach a blank side that isn't a wall or is not past the entranceway, you're going to take a tile, look for this arrow, and point it towards your side, giving you some more space to explore. Now, that may trigger and add some new things like this gargoyle here. There are other things that can appear as well, as I'll flip over a few more tiles here to explain some of the fun, enjoyable interactions you may come across. As you can see, there are plenty of different obstacles and objects that you can find while exploring, but do know that once you reveal a room that doesn't end your movement, you can still use the rest of your movement points. However, you cannot split your movement points between another action, so make sure you end where you want to end, as you don't get another chance, as this is one of those limited actions. Keep in mind that some of the things revealed could affect your movement. For example, these are fire spaces. There's also going to be fire spaces other players can put on the board. If you ever enter a space with fire, if it's a normal printed one, then you're actually going to have to discard a card at random. If it's one of these ones that a player put down, you're going to discard 2 cards. These are teleportation spots. More will appear on the board as you explore. Those can be used in conjunction with a spell or a one-time shortcut to sort of move around the board to the next closest warp space. Then there are the curse cards. If you ever end your turn in a spot there, not simply just moving through it, you'll draw from the curse deck. Now that may sound bad, but there are cards that are very good for you, some that are bad, but I feel more often than not, many of them were a bit, I would say, chaotic or wild, as they affect almost everyone, and could be good or bad just depending on the situation. So there are a bit of a gamble, but I wouldn't say that they're straight up a negative spot. Then there are the 3 other objects upon the board, which are a bit more of limiting your movement. First, there are these 2 objects. They are both movable objects. During your turn, you can spend an action to manipulate obstacles in your room or an adjacent room. You will roll a die, and if you roll a 4 or above, so in this case that was a fail, you can move those objects depending on the rules. This one is called a movable object. They can be moved anywhere within their own room if you're successful. This is a rotating obstacle. It simply will rotate, which is a great way for you to open pathways or close them off. The final tile I put down were these locked gates. Here you actually have to discard a key card in order to open them up. Once they are open, anyone can use them, but it will cost you a key, so keep that in mind if you really want to make your way through those rooms. Now, there are some other printed stuff on here. These are simply just abysses. You can't go into them. But these are bookshelves. This is where you can find your spells as well as your keys. Whenever you're near a bookshelf, you can take the loot action. This is one of the other limited time actions, so you can only loot one bookshelf per turn. You're going to put a loot tile on there, indicating it's now empty, and then there are some conditions about drawing which cards and how many. You see, while the backs are the same, there are two different decks. If you're in a blue room, you'll draw from the blue deck. If you're in a red room, you will draw from the red deck. Cards are relatively the same in terms of having keys, relics, both cursed and holy, as well as spells, which some of them may combine with the key. Main difference being the red ones tend to have cards that have more keys on one card, as well as stronger spell key combinations, and just spells that are a little bit faster or better than their blue counterparts. So the red rooms are a bit rarer, but give a higher reward. The other issue is the size of the bookshelf. They come in large, 3 squares, or small, 2 squares. We just looted a small one. When you loot a small one, you're going to roll a die. If the result is 4 or above, you get to draw 2 cards of the matching room color. In this case, we rolled a 3, we'd only get to draw 1. But if we were doing it here against a larger bookshelf, we're guaranteed the 2-card draw. The final 2 possible actions you can take are ones you can take multiple times in addition to the manipulating objects one, and that is casting spells as well as playing relic cards. Spells will be played for their ability, then discarded. Keep in mind, if it has a key combined with it, that means you lose that key as well. So it's one of those decisions where do you use the spell ability or do you keep it for the key later on in order to win the game? Playing relics is simply just slotting them into their spot on the board. Keep in mind, you can only have one of each type at a time. And if you want to play another, you would discard the one you have in order to play the new one. After you take your 3 actions, your turn ends, but something else will trigger depending on how far the game goes. You see that strange symbol there? When you flip over a room with that symbol, that means the guardian of the matching color square, so that in case that is red, but there's a blue, a green as well, spawns there. Then it's going to give its focus token to the player that explored that room. At the end of that player's turn, the guardians are going to move. Each guardian will roll a dice equal to the number of guardians out. So right now, that is just the 1. However, once more guardians start spawning on the board, they're going to roll an extra die. So for now, let's say we roll the 1, and they will move that many spaces towards their focus target. They do get blocked by the usual walls as well as the obstacles, but they do break through locked doors. They just bust right through. They don't need no stinking key. Keep in mind, by the way, that they are impeded a little bit by fire, but they can still move through them as they don't have a hand of cards. If they ever make it to their focus target, that player dies. When a player dies, first, that player must discard 1 card randomly from their hand. Then, with their last breath, they are either going to move all the objects in one room or exchange possession of 2 relics currently equipped to players. Then they're going to place their piece on its side in the space that they died. When a guardian makes it and either kills their focus or for some reason, let's say this were to happen where I rotated it and made it so it's impossible for the guardian to make it to me, then that player loses the focus at the end of the turn. And the guardian is going to have each player it can reach right now roll a die. Whoever rolled the lowest is going to get that guardian's focus. As I said, there are multiple guardians. You'll find them after you explore the first few rooms, start flipping over more and more. Like I said, they come in different colors. Though, be careful, one of the curse cards adds a guardian that spawns at the start, making it a very scary curse and one that could technically kill everyone in 1 turn. Should that happen, by the way, that everyone dies at once, then you actually end the game and it's a loss for everyone. But once you take your 3 actions, other players will move, do their actions, trying to avoid the guardians, keeping in mind that as each one appears, they will roll more movement dice, making it harder and harder for you to escape. However, you will of course have plenty of tricks, like I said, breaking their focus, or there are cards you can play outside your turn that won't cost an action. They have the instant keyword, meaning they can be played on other people's turns, making a boon, or more often than not, hindering your opponents in ways they weren't expecting during their turn. Gameplay will continue with everyone exploring, trying to desperately find those keys before the guardians catch them, and hopefully one person can get the 5 keys of the matching color and make it back to the exit and be the one sole survivor. Now, there are some alternate rules you can use to change up your game. First off, if you're playing with less than 4, you can use a different entrance room for you to explore and get out of. Game length can also be modified by changing the number of keys required if you're looking for a longer or shorter game. Finally, there are 2v2 or 3v3 team battle modes. In this mode, you'll be working with teammates in order to find 8 keys if you're playing 2v2 or 10 keys if it's 3v3. Now, the way the game works is mostly the same with a few different changes. First, you don't need everyone to make it to the end. Once one member of a team makes it to the end, every player on that team reveals their hand in order to show if they meet the requirement of keys. If they do, they all win the game. Next, there is a lot more card sharing. If you're on the same space, you may then give cards to each other. It does not have to be an equal distribution. It's a great way for you to make sure each player has their own reactions and defenses, as well as maybe keeping an equal balance of keys in order to protect them. Also, whenever someone gains focus of one of the guardians, any player on that person's team can give them a card. This is a great way for you to get some defenses before the guardians start to move and maybe keep you alive a little bit longer. Outside of that, it's the same. Find the keys, have someone make it back to the end, and hopefully your side will be the winner. So this falls under the take that style of gameplay with, of course, the race to the finish to see who's first. Now, the big difference though is when I think of other ones that have similar mechanics, usually you can say that guy's in first, that one's in second, let's dogpile them and make sure to keep a few more for that person. And if I'm in third, hopefully everyone's used all their stuff. Here, it's a bit more complicated. Because the win condition are the keys that are hidden in hand, it's a bit harder to know if someone's actually in first. Someone could have a large hand, but just not the right keys or not even any keys. The only way to really tell if someone telegraphs it by beelining it straight to the exit, which is what I actually did on my first game because I got the keys really fast. I was 3 rooms away, so to speak. So I was like, oh, I'll get there no problem. Unfortunately, like I said, first game, didn't know all the spells as well, so everyone proceeded to slow me down, throw down fire, and pretty much by the end of 1 round or so, I was surrounded by fire, had a guardian looking at me, and had lost the win condition number of keys. So you have to be a bit more sneaky with how you deal with getting to the end. So when you go exploring, it's not simply just get resources and try to find the win con keys, which of course you're still going to be doing because more resources the better and you want to win. But you have to think about the exit strategy. If you go too far away, that gives a lot of time for people to mess with you. But if you make it too obvious and just try to stay near the exit, odds are you either won't find the keys or people are going to know and they're going to hit you with stuff. So maybe you have to think, do I get more cards in order to defend myself? Or do I try to put a teleportation nearby and I can use it, but other people can as well? This, of course, gives other players more time, as well as more guardians to appear. Because when the first one appears, it's moving 6 at most. It's actually pretty easy to avoid. But once you get 2, and especially 3, and 4 if you get the curse one, then things are going to get quite scary. I noticed with one owl, I don't know why, but for once the 3 had shown up, it decided it would never roll below a 4. So that huge distance you covered, you're like, this is great, it can't catch me. It will book it and take you out. Which actually brings me to something I really enjoy. I'm never a huge fan of player elimination, especially in a game that doesn't end very quickly. This one can go on a while because it's take that style, but pretty much you get to stand back up. You lose some resources, but it isn't a loss. This means that you are in it unless everyone gets killed before anyone can stand up, which is possible, or someone gets that win. So you're always thinking a bit more. It's not a total loss if you get knocked out and happen to have a bunch of guardians on you. You still usually have some tricks up your sleeve. So this is definitely for people who really enjoy that sort of backstabbing kind of gameplay where you get to mess around with each other just when they least expect it. And as well as those who maybe try to do the strategies that go under the radar, because you're really going to need that if you really want to get the win in order to make it to the end with the keys. Of course, having those protective spells helps, but if no one notices that you're actually making your way back, it's going to be very useful. There are plenty of games I'm sure that you can think of, but this one adds a bit more extra with exploration going on, as well as trying to hide the winner, or at least make it less obvious, unless, like I said before, you beeline it to the end. If you're interested to learn more about this game, I'll have a link to the Kickstarter in the description. You can let me know if this is one that you decide to back. I'd love to hear from you in the comments down below. But thank you so much for joining me and making Out of the Library with me, and I can't wait to see you next time. But for now, I'm Will, and this has been a Roll for Crit preview.